Are you angry all the time? It is such a painful state to be in. Now, most of us don't love being around others who are angry, but when we feel angry, yeah, it's even worse to be the person feeling angry all the time. So in today's video, I'm going to give you a couple of questions to point you in the direction of why you're angry all the time and what you can do about it. Some pretty practical tips that you can implement and also insights to help you see the problem and why anger is your predominant emotion right now. Okay, so whenever somebody is feeling one emotion predominantly, so for example, I feel angry all the time, or I'm anxious all the time, or I'm depressed all the time, that emotion has become a habitual emotion. And so I talk a lot about how emotions give us information, and learning to read what information that emotion is giving us is incredibly helpful for navigating our life, being in a relationship, managing our emotions, right? However, if it is a habitual emotion, it means that you're probably taking all sorts of different emotions and translating it into the one that you're the most comfortable, not necessarily happiest, but the most comfortable expressing. So if anger is your habitual emotion, we'll really need to go underneath it to see what the kind of driver emotions are, and then what are those emotions telling you. So generally, anger has a number of different messages for us. We tend to feel angry when we're hurt, when our boundaries are crossed, and when we feel like something's not fair. So those tend to be the drivers of anger for specific situations. So it might be worth taking a moment right now if you feel anger habitually. Are you in a situation where you're continually feeling hurt, or your boundaries are continually being crossed, or you're continually feeling like something's not fair? And if that's actually happening, right, if there is something underneath your anger that falls into one of those categories, then that can indicate this is where I need to do some work. This is where I need to apply skillful means. And I will come out with another video with more information on skillful means. But where can I apply skillful means to change the situation to either protect myself if I'm feeling hurt or my boundaries are being crossed, or somehow manage to deal with this "it's not fair" narrative. And the "it's not fair" narrative can be extremely strong, and sometimes it's accurate. Things really aren't fair. And other times it's not so accurate, right? So that's sort of another level here. But when it's on that kind of level of fairness, then there is sort of this element that the universe isn't fair. Why was this one person born into dire circumstances in one part of the world and somebody else is born into really good circumstances in another part of the world? Like, there are a lot of things in the world that aren't fair. Right? And if we get stuck on that as a refrain, as if we expect things to be fair, then we can go down that hole of resentment, because that's very tied to resentment, sort of an ongoing thing. Another example here could be if you're treated unfairly by your family and differently than other family members, and this happens, right? I know this happens. Yes, you're right. It's not fair. Yet sticking with the "it's not fair" really kind of keeps you stuck in anger and a feeling of powerlessness. Right? There's an element of powerlessness underneath chronic anger. So we are all dealt cards, right? We're all given cards, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. How do we capitalize on the hand we have and make the best of it for ourselves, for nobody else, just for ourselves? Like, how can we make our lives the best they can be? And that's usually not by focusing on what's fair. How do we begin to deal with that? How do we take the anger that comes from that and have it motivate us to do something? So if it's really tied to something we need to do, it very often doesn't become chronic. Chronic anger comes more from the feeling of other people need to change. This person who's crossing my boundaries needs to change, not me. They need to stop doing it. Well, that's going to keep you stuck, and that's going to keep you a victim of that person's bad behavior. So boundaries and anger are really linked together, and I am working on a new online program about boundaries, and I actually have a quiz what's your boundary personality type? So I'm going to put the link below for that quiz. And I think you'll find it insightful because that quiz kind of identifies why you find it hard to set boundaries and hold boundaries, right? So boundaries protect us from anger, right? They also can cause us to feel anger. We also might hold back and not set boundaries because we're afraid of somebody else's anger. So anger and boundaries are all mixed up together. Working on boundaries might be something that would be super helpful for you to do if you feel anger all the time. All right, so if you're angry all the time, question number one is, are you truly feeling anger or is it resentment? And I do have a 1-minute YouTube video on the difference between the two. I'll link it here. But generally, resentment is more of kind of a simmering, ongoing feeling of, I'm doing too much in this situation. Other people aren't meeting my expectations. They're not giving back. I'm unappreciated. Resentment is more of a subtler, ongoing, simmering emotion that's actually quite toxic. And the solution for resentment tends to be boundaries and expectations, although some of the other techniques that we'll be talking about today will apply as well. But I just think it's really important to identify whether you're feeling anger or resentment. Now, two other questions about your feeling angry all the time so we can get to the root of it. And then I want to share the comment that was posted on one of my videos that fueled my idea for this video. And I'll also talk about a handful of concepts for lowering or even getting over feeling angry all the time. All right. So the other two questions are whether or not you're depressed. So clinical depression is actually tied to anger. In particular, it manifests that way with men. So men can exhibit their depression by constant irritation, agitation, and sort of continual low-level anger, right? So if that's the problem, then receiving help for depression would be the route to go. And then the other question for you is whether your anger is tied to an extremely traumatic childhood. Now, this would not be uncommon because of a number of reasons, but extreme trauma and neglect in childhood can really make us feel angry, of course, right? Of course. And it can definitely fuel that it's not fair. And yeah, no, it is not fair if that's what happened to you, that you had to live through that. So if a traumatic childhood is fueling that anger, it probably will be required to address and receive help for the traumatic childhood. The other thing about traumatic childhoods, often there's somebody in the family who expresses anger in a really unhealthy way, rages, and then another family member might repress anger. So there's never a healthy demonstration of anger and how to deal with it. And then often family members, the children, are kind of given roles. That one's allowed to feel angry. That one's not. That one needs to suppress it all the time. So where were you in that kind of hierarchy of anger expression, right? But if we're around somebody who's angry all the time and abusive to us, of course we are going to feel angry. Let's go back to boundaries, it's not fair, and being hurt. All three of them, if we're in an abusive relationship, or particularly when we're children, if we're being abused, those are going to fuel anger, whether it's expressed or repressed. And then with trauma treatment and some healing, right, then it can eventually come around to, okay, what's the most effective thing for you today if you are no longer in that situation? How do we take that energy and redirect the energy in a way that's productive for you and for your life? Okay, so those are kind of two situations that definitely require a conscientious effort to address those two problems. Okay, so let me read you one of the comments I got on one of my anger videos. It is from somebody who says that they had a very stressful couple of years and they're now constantly angry to the point where it gets ridiculous and boils over. How to stop being so angry. I have valid reasons and I am not taking anger out on people, but I am tired of this fist shaking to the sky. It's emotionally draining. So I want to say to that person, I'm sorry that you've had such a horrible couple of years, and I understand. And when I hear that phrase, the fist shaking to the sky, two things come up for me. One is powerlessness, right? It's clear that things are happening that are painful, possibly destructive, perhaps impacting this person's way of earning a living. I don't know, or impacting family members, or there's some major loss here. But there are events that this person feels powerless over and probably is, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that happens in life that we are powerless over. And none of us like to feel powerless, right? It's probably another one of our least favorite emotions, anger and powerless. But when we are powerless over something, if we acknowledge it, it can actually sometimes be helpful. Like, I really can't change this. Okay, so what came up for me? Powerlessness and then grief. I don't know this person. I don't know if this is accurate, but what came up for me is that a real grief process is needed here, that there have been some losses, and it may be losses of people that this person loved. It, as I mentioned, might be loss of a way of earning a living, or sometimes it can just be a loss of our sense of self. Like if we had a sense of self, or sometimes it can actually be sort of a loss of a sense of security. Something has happened that's shaken us in a way that hasn't happened before, and we're angry about it. We wish that hadn't happened. We might have some anger at ourselves, probably misguided, about allowing ourselves in that situation. I know of people who have been in accidents, or their loved ones have been in accidents, and then those people feel angry at themselves for being in that place and time, or not being in that place or time. But accidents happen, right? That's why they're called accidents. They're not our fault. It's sort of magical thinking to think, oh, I should have known, right? So in those situations, we have to allow ourselves to process the loss. And this is where anger can cover up another emotion. And if somebody doesn't want to allow themselves to grieve, or they're in a family environment or a social environment where you're not allowed to grieve for something like that, they may not be allowing themselves to grieve, and that will just continue that anger, right? So the anger covers up some of the deeper emotions. Now, fist shaking at the sky could also go back to that feeling of it's not fair. And as I said, sometimes things aren't fair. So how do you bring a sense of spirituality into the fact that our universe isn't fair? Bad things happen to good people. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So usually some sense of spirituality can really help on those things. All right, so I've covered a lot, and I know I've talked a lot, but I do want to talk about 3 other things that can fuel and maintain your anger. Now, one of them is constant stress. So in the comment that I read, that person said that they're feeling incredibly stressed, and they've been stressed for a while. Well, stress chemicals and anger chemicals are very, very similar. And so probably anger does not go down until stress is relieved. And how do you relieve stress if you're in a stressful situation? Well, that is a problem, but it is possible. So taking the time for, minimum 15 minutes a day to let your body relax, let all those stress chemicals go down, exercising for an hour, releasing some of those stress chemicals. So some combination of release of the chemicals and a strengthening of the relaxation response to help with the stress. So that's one thing that will continue to sustain anger. All right, next thing is the storyline. Now, I talk about this a little bit in my video on CBT exercises for anger, and I am also going to release right after this video a meditation visualization on dropping the storyline. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe. It's also a nice reinforcement to me to know that you like the material and that you want to stay on the channel. So it's very helpful in a number of ways. But if you subscribe, you then will be notified. You can also hit like a little notification button when I release new videos. So keep your eye out for that one. But a storyline fuels our anger. So we might feel angry from an initial event. And then we have a story that goes with it. The story could be, this always happens. This person always does this. I never get what I want. I always do this. And that storyline can go on and on. It can get bigger and bigger. It snowballs. And the storyline fuels the anger, and the anger fuels the storyline. So figuring out how to cut the storyline. And then the third thing that can really fuel anger is your negative core belief or beliefs, right? If you have negative core beliefs of, I'm not worthwhile, I'm not worthy enough, I'm inadequate, I never get what I want, I'm in danger all the time, right? These are negative core beliefs that can fuel the anger response. And I do have a PDF on transforming your negative core beliefs. If you haven't downloaded it yet, make sure to download it. The link will be in the description to this video, and I include 3 techniques for rewiring the negative core belief. So do me a favor, comment below. Let me know if any of this hit home for you in terms of why you may feel habitually angry and whether this felt helpful or not. And any questions, post them below. I'll be sure to respond. If you're new to my channel, my name is Barbara Heffernan. I was a psychotherapist for 20 years. I'm a mindfulness meditation instructor, a life coach, and I weave some Buddhist philosophy and wisdom traditions in, binding everything together to help people live more joyful lives. All right, take care. Bye-bye.